So I guess I should probably start talking. Um, so welcome to anybody who's watching the stream. Basically, I'm first of all kind of like dusting the cobwebs of all my streaming equipment, but also trying to. I just started playing Doom like this week. I was kind of plowing through it. I'd play the original. I think the first two. A little bit of the Xbox One, but tonight I will be doing a Cacodemon, which is basically kind of like a beholder, but with horns instead of big tentacle eyeballs. Um, so just kind of going through the basic outline of what I want it to look like. It's actually looking a little bit like Mike Wazowski, and I'm not sure if I like or dislike that, but we'll see where this goes. But as far as whether I've played Doom Eternal or not, I'm actually just going through the first one, the 2016 version, right now. So I haven't played Eternal yet. I like just got to the part where you first go to hell. So I'm not exactly sure how far into the campaign I am. But it is a hell of a lot of fun. Highly recommended. Um, it is absolutely like up my alley in that it's extremely simplistic uh, killing of demons with a heavy metal industrial backdrop of music, and it is just unabashedly simple but really brutal. I love it so much. And all the designs are great. I mean, they're definitely like a new take on some of the classics, like the original Can Demon. Obviously, looks more like this, but the one they have in the 2016 game has more of like a like multiple mouthed type setup where he's got like teeth here, teeth here, teeth here. So it's an interesting redesign. So I'm going a little bit more closer to the classic one and trying to update that a little bit. But I think, like I said, it's looking a little Mike Wazowski-ish. So I'm gonna play around with it a little bit before I start doing any sort of colors. Just make that eye a little smaller. Usually helps in making his body look a lot bigger. Yeah, any questions that you guys have, just let me know in the chat, and I'll try to keep up with them. I'm a little new to like a lot of this sort of streaming type stuff, so forgive me if anything gets a little wonky during the stream. But I'll just be here probably for like an hour, maybe two, working on this. So I figured with all of this, basically, I'm based out of Vegas, and right now we pretty much just got a citywide shutdown. So the whole strip and everything is closed and everything. Everybody's quarantined and all that for 30 days, but it looks like that might be extended. So because of all that, I was thinking potentially maybe going trying out some different ways of showing my art because I can't really obviously can't do shows right now. Um, like a lot of the conventions that I was planning on doing are either up in the air or canceled. So something like streaming is probably something I should add to my arsenal, or at least use it a little bit more often because I very rarely do it. Um, so we'll see. It'd be nice if I got more used to this because it's a little weird just kind of talking into the ether. Okay. So I'm liking where he's going so far. Um, he's a little too ball like, so I'm gonna liquefy him a little bit and kind of smush and squish him to look a little bit more like a big mass of like flesh and demonic meat and fat, instead of just a meatball. Give him maybe some, like a couple like prominent horns instead of just a bunch of the same size. You know, you want to diversify it a little bit. Let's make that eye squint a little bit more. Actually, that might be cool. Make the eye. Usually, like playing with the different shapes of standard things makes it look a little bit more otherworldly. So having an eyeball that's more shaped like this rather than just, you know, half a circle or whatever usually helps. That's why I always like when I see beholders when they're designed with the kind of rectangular or squarish type iris. Always looks real creepy. Okay, so I want him to also look like he's frowning a little bit more because I don't want him to look like he's obviously going to look somewhat silly. But I'm going to try to make him look a little bit more intimidating. I think I might need to open up his mouth a little bit more. So a lot of this is just going to be like fiddling around until I'm just doing like little lines here and there with a brush that really isn't that fancy. It's just a little chalk brush. You can see the outline of it here. And it's just got some texture on it, so it doesn't look overly digital. And that way, even at the sketching point, it looks a bit more like I'm using a pencil. Okay, so I'm gonna open his mouth a little bit. At this point, I don't mind getting a little rough with everything. So I'll just get the lasso tool, make that mouth open up a little bit more, round it out, almost like he's, you know, getting ready for a roar. And like I said, if any of you guys are watching, feel free to get in the chat. I know I'm going to be trying to keep an eye on the chat as best as possible. Okay, yeah, that looks a little bit more like he wants to eat you instead of just smiling at the camera. Maybe have a little bit of slobber in between the teeth. I know they kind of give off like an electricity blast, so if I can, I'll try to show that as well, depending on how far I get into this. wanted. Okay. So I think he's starting to look a lot more mean. So what I might do is just treat this pretty messy, and I'll just do one more line pass over it, just to really define the basic shapes. Let me decrease the size of this text. There we go. So just decrease the opacity of the other one, and now I'm gonna go back over it and define some of these shapes. And even this is still going to be pretty rough, but I need this in order to see exactly what is going to be catching my lights and what is going to be casting my shadows. And I'll try to control myself and not do too much shading at this stage, but just darken some areas if they need to be, just to accentuate them. Also see how accurate I go with the colors on this guy. I tend to like to try to make things work within my own aesthetic, which has kind of been changing a little bit recently to slightly more dialed down colors and everything, but I think with this guy I can go a little bit more colorful, since, like, yeah, he's mainly red, but he's got those great colors in his horns and his eye. Maybe I can try to make that work. So I would have music going on, but I'm pretty sure YouTube might mute things if I just had my regular old music on, so I'd probably have to find some public domain music or whatever. I'll try that for next time. This is all learning experience right now. force myself to figure out this mouth. My details got a little muddied in some of these areas, so just gotta clean it up a little bit. But I'm liking where it's going. You might need to be a little bit lumpier, because this guy over here, he's just like a ball of gums and muscle. Might need a little bit more like bulges. Maybe give him like a really lumpy bottom lip right here. So it's hard to tell with the lower part of him, but I know in the newer games they give him like little hands that just kind of dangle underneath, and he's got like this gullet where you can see probably like whatever he eats just goes down into there. But the classic design is a little bit more like it's a little hard to tell. Like obviously these are tentacles of some kind, but they always to me looked like, I don't know, like they like little like a flesh beard or something, because you never quite see the end of them, and of course you see it, you know, and it's like this big, and back then, you know, it's not like we had HD or anything like that, but so I'm sort of just gonna make it like he's got maybe a little tendrils at the bottom, maybe one or two of them with like a fingernail coming through, but I'm not going to give him arms per se. Like I always thought of this guy as like Krang, sort of like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Krang, where he's obviously, this guy can float, but yeah, it doesn't have like claws or anything. Always good to add a little bit of drips. Once you can feel the texture of a creature, that's always good. Yeah, maybe right here, give him a broken horn or two. Little stuff like that adds some story to your creature. Like, oh man, he's been through some shit. There we go. Okay, now to this mouth. I always, at least in my process, I always zoom in and out. I know a lot of people also usually like to have a there's an option to put a window of the whole picture that you're working on in the top right, so you can see at a small scale what you're working on, and it mainly really helps to see if what like if your piece translates at a small scale, and usually if it does, that means that you're communicating things visually in a pretty cohesive way. But if you look at your thumbnail and things kind of look like a mess, and it's hard to pick out your figure from the background, or it just maybe it doesn't have a sense of depth if it's like an environment piece, or something's really drawing your eye but it's not the thing that you want. Using that little window or zooming in and out can really help, because I know many times I've been zooming in this close to a piece getting too obsessed with the details, and then I zoom out and it doesn't look great. Um, Not with this one though. I'm pretty happy with where this is going. So I do like this little V-shaped form of teeth he's got in the front. He's got it right here too, and he's got they kind of have it in the new one too, where he has sort of a beak in the front, and he's got the two teeth right here. At least I think so. And he's got the mouths right here. There's his eye. So he looks a bit more bird-like in the new one, which I think is cool. But I'm sticking with this. I know when I was a kid, drawing teeth was probably my favorite thing, just because it's a detail that you can kind of just work on over and over and over again. It's kind of the same thing, but uh, if you do it right, then it can look really cool and gnarly. Like I was always obsessed with like Todd McFarlane's style, and he would be doing lots of like folds like this and teeth and gnarly gory stuff, and that's what I wanted to do. Like I'd usually draw characters as a kid, like say it'd be your standard happy face, almost emoji type thing, but then I'd give them these really like big, too detailed smiles, just because it was always kind of off-putting. And I don't know, there's something about drawing the gums and teeth that's really easy, because it's about repetition, and also like the showing of teeth and gums is just kind of gross once you start showing too many or too much of it. So that's always fun. Yes, Lindsay, we love our quarantine demon meatball. He's keeping us good company in these weird times. So I think on his skin too, I'm gonna give him a couple like warts, maybe a little pimples that are ready to pop or something. He just needs to be gross. You want to smell this thing coming. So little details like that will really help do it. I'll give him some veins in his eyes once I get to that part. Um, Let me finish this mouth. Give him maybe a couple molars, some of the flattened type teeth. They don't all need to be incisors. It's very tempting though. Or is that canines? Are those different? I can't remember. I think canines are the pointy ones. Okay, I'm liking this so far. So let me darken in his mouth and maybe do a little bit more shading, And then we can start adding some color. I'll probably add the little bits of electricity at the very end, but for now I'll just leave his mouth black. Maybe with a little bit of detail showing the caverns of it. But for now, I need him to. I need the big details to read the most. Yeah, so maybe like a lopsided smile of sorts. So he's not quite roaring as much as I would like him to. So let me save. Actually, let me get his iris real quick. There we go. Okay. So let me copy these. So this, just in case I don't like it, or what I might do is upload a lot of these files for my patrons. I'm going to save that version of that sketch, and now I'm going to mess with this one and see if I can give him open his mouth a little bit more. Maybe make him snarl a bit. Want that rounded out open mouth feel to it a little bit more. Not going to completely overhaul it, but using the liquify tool can really help and just kind of push things just a little bit more. And certainly a go-to tool for me whenever I don't feel like redrawing something and just need it to be nudged just a little bit. And make those horns a little bigger. Okay. I like that a little bit better. So let me show the before and after real quick. So before, after. I know it's a little hard to see, but after, before. So yeah, it looks a little bit scrawnier in that one. In this one, just certain things accentuated to where they just help them look a little bit more imposing. check on something real quick. Okay. So I'm just going to put him up top and set him to multiply. And now I'm going to add some color. So I'm just going to do pretty rough lassoed shape of this guy, and then I'll fill in the details later. Just getting the basics so I can start my flats. And even then, I might just go straight into it with the colors and not worrying about too many layers or anything. Okay, here's where it's a little harder to figure out the detail. This is usually my process for things. Sometimes I go just straight into the color and painting just because I get impatient sometimes, but I usually find whenever I do that, I'm always fighting with it the whole time because I haven't figured out what the design exactly looks like yet, and I just, so anxious about getting into the actual rendering, which is my favorite part. I just want to get all the nitty-gritty details, but it's good to resist that temptation because often like line art like this can really help you figure out the basics and give you a strong foundation to work from. Okay, so I'll do a little color picker from him. We'll see how accurate we can get these. And I'll just do my eyedrop tool and create a clipping mask on the flat of the red color, and then start doing the teeth. So these basic things just figuring out right now. Not even putting too much work into each. With a lot of my stuff, my rule is, if I blur my eyes and I can see what it is, that means it's working. And right now, I don't need to fuss over super intricate lighting or anything. Just need the basic colors. Now I'm starting to realize how many teeth I gave him. And he might have too many on this left side. So I might just give him an extra over here just to kind of balance it out a little bit. Maybe just like a tiny little one right there. Maybe like a little stray one right there. And a little one right there. So I might also, while I'm at it, I think once I start getting into more of the details, I'll probably add uh, some teeth inside his mouth, because right now it just looks a little flat, and I need some depth in there. And you know, it's usually a lot scarier with these monsters once you see that, oh no, there's more teeth inside. Like the way he digests you is not just these big old fangs up front. So it seems in the design that they keep the horns and the teeth the same color. So you know what? I'm gonna try it a little different. I always like when horns are a little bit more yellowy. So let me see what this looks like. Wait, hold on. Seems to be so, because of it contrasting with a lot of the more saturated oranges and reds I've got. It looks like this color that I picked is actually just, you can see it right over here. It's mostly just gray, like a light gray. But contrasted with this red, it looks blue. So it's kind of one of those weird things with color theory where the temptation is to just pick out a blue, and that will be your blue color. But usually, in order to give your piece a little bit more color depth, and usually to balance out areas of saturation, like where you want the audience's eye to be led and everything, a lot of that can be controlled with the balancing of saturated and neutral tones. And neutral tones like this one that I'm using right now shows up blue and instead of gray, because of how it contrasts with the other colors. So if I put it maybe next to a different color, then it will look way more gray. So let me try this right here. If I just do that right there, this gray that I'm putting on this white is the same color as in the horns, but it looks way different over here. Okay, so I can start to see where I've left a little blank spots in my base shapes. So now I'm just kind of filling those in. Some of these edges I didn't quite lasso. Okay, so now I'm gonna make these horns a little bit more. Wait, oh, that's the teeth. Hold on. So I do a lot of this color balance stuff and mess with the saturation and everything. This is like one of the things I probably do the most in my process. Just because for me, settling on colors is one of the harder things for me to do in my process. Okay, so I kind of like the horns a little lighter like that. But they are starting to look a little bit more natural comparatively to the teeth that look a little more cartoony. So maybe it's good to keep them blue. I don't know. around, just kind of like fiddling with them. Like, okay, what does this look like? What does this look like? I'm still gonna keep them desaturated, but maybe just make them a little brighter. So that's probably not all that different than what I had before, but let's try that. Okay, now I'm gonna figure out his eyeball. I'm just gonna color pick it from this original image and then go from there and see what works on this type of illustration. So yeah, that is looking very cartoony right now. So I'm going to desaturate a lot of these things. And I don't know, maybe do I give him like a milky eye so it looks like he's going a little bit blind, or I don't know. I kind of like that more like puke green eye. It's a little grosser. And then maybe with his can't remember. I think it's the is it the iris that's colored and the pupils black? I can't remember. Whichever one's the color. Maybe I'll make little bits of that. This almost emerald green over here. That way, it's not just all one big overly saturated like part of his design. Yeah, I can see the messages all right. And like I said, guys, feel free to talk in the chat, or please let me know if you have any questions or if you just want me to talk about something. I've got my eyes on the chat. Got it right here. Still trying to figure out how to have it on my screen without it recording it or whatever. But this is a learning process. Okay, so I see I missed a couple of his horns. Uh, these little guys right here, little nubs. There. And that's basically it for his colors. Although it looks like he's oh wait. I need to give him some gums. Give him some raw pink gums. Right here. Another part of the teeth that make it so fun to draw is like when you do the gums kind of wrapping around them and see where they go inside the actual gum, and you can put a little bit of that reflected like glistening light off of them. It just makes it look nice and slimy for something like this. But I now see that I didn't quite draw like where his gums end. They just kind of blended in with his meaty mass. So I'm gonna just kind of wing this part. And probably just have the little bits that wrap around the tooth, and then the rest be mostly his actual skin. Yeah, see, now it looks like he's like wearing lipstick or something. So I kind of like the idea in this original where his exposed inside flesh is almost it's kind of comes up to his eyeballs, which is really gross. Um, but let me give that a try. Like even his eyelid is the same color. Let me dial back some of the gums on the teeth. Almost looks like he ate something pink. I don't want that. Okay. So I think you know what I like a little bit more. I think he needs that lid to be the same color as his skin. It just reads a little bit better. Otherwise, it kind of gets lost in the pink. So I'm gonna do that. And I think with that, I can start to adjust a lot of the levels. Like with these flat colors, I think it's usually good to keep them a little dark, um, because if you start going into your highlights a little too early, then um, you kind of start to again focus a little too much on detail. Um, so I'm gonna dial back this top sketch reveal so I can get a little bit more clarity with the colors. And now I'm going to start doing some shading. So I'm all doing this within the same masked shape on the very bottom right here of his body. I'm just going to do a layer at the top. I'll do an overlay layer for now. And like, we're not trying to go like super accurate with the actual lighting because this also doesn't make a lot of sense. Like it basically the types of light being reflected on from his horns and his gums and his skin are all different kinds of light, and that's just how the art style from back then. So I'm gonna try to keep it a little bit more uniform. A question from the chat: what art books do I recommend as far as fundamentals? It's weird. I feel bad. I'm sure a lot of other artists can relate on this. I've got tons of art fundamental books. I can't say if I've actually like gone through them, like really with like real purpose of learning behind it. There's like so much stuff on YouTube. Honestly, like I would do that or um, these days, if you have like particularly favorite artists or whatever, a lot of them have tutorials either on YouTube or they'll have them on their Gumroad or even their ArtStation, and they'll often come with a video and maybe even their brush set, um, and sometimes even the layered PSD files. But if you're looking for just like drawing fundamentals, um, there's so many art books about that. Like I would just honestly like look up top 10 drawing instructional books. Um, it also really depends on what style you're getting into. Um, because if you're trying to like get into comic book art, then go for that. Look up Jim Lee's stuff, look up Jack Kirby stuff, look up basically whoever's your favorite. Try to either replicate that or see if they have any classes or tutorials or whatever. Or a lot of them have put out books too. Um, or if you're going for super detailed, like say Alan Williams or Tim Von Ruden. I know those guys are like real big traditional pencil artists. I think they both have tutorials as well, showing how they do shading and everything. They've got sketchbooks. Um, a lot of learning is basically just trying and failing until you get it right. So I always kind of recommend it if you feel a little lost in knowing how to do things, try to replicate some of the stuff that you feel like you want to do. Like something I did when I was a kid was um, try to replicate Frazetta paintings. They'd never be nearly as good, but through doing it, I would kind of learn how to mix colors, how to blend certain things, how to get effects from the materials that I didn't think about before. And all of that was just through like giving it a try. So just started to do some shading on the red part of him. And this is just through a multiply layer at this point. Um, so now he's actually starting to get some dimension to him, which I'm liking. Um, I'm just gonna basically treat this as if like the lighting of the background that I have him on is going to be the lighting for the piece. So a lot of these shadows that are happening on this guy and his horns and everything, I'm being a little messy with them. Um, but typically, when you are figuring out exactly what color the shadows and the light should be, look at its environment. What's the source of light? What color is that? How does that react with the things that you've put down? So with him, I figure like, okay, this background is like red, so his the shadows will likely be reflecting some sort of red color. It's kind of why you see, say if somebody is how do I say this? Um, if you're outside and you've got the sun uh, showing on like a blue car and you're really close to that blue car, on your skin, depending on the reflectivity of the metal, you'll likely see like a blue hue. It may be very minor or really noticeable, but you'll be able to see that. Um, and then that's just one way in which the environment starts to affect the lighting of the thing that you're trying to reference. Also, guys, but I am by no means a teacher. I am also just another artist doing his thing, and I also constantly go back to fundamentals videos on how to do things, just because sometimes you think you know what you're doing, and you're like, okay, I got this, and then you run into a piece that you're really struggling with, and you're like, why can't I figure this out? And yeah, sometimes it's just good to go back to the basics and really figure out, like, oh, okay, I was getting little too cocky and wasn't thinking about this, and I wasn't taking this into consideration. It's a lot of different factors, but yeah, we're all always learning. Even the people that you really look up to probably think the stuff, the like art of theirs that you like, they might think it sucks because they notice a little thing about it they don't like, or they worked really hard on it and it didn't turn out like they wanted or like they imagined it. Um, it's perfectly natural. And I know even some of the best artists out there have a oh, what's it called? Uh, it's on the edge of my tongue. Imposter syndrome. Yeah, even the best guys out there feel like, oh no, I'm not that all that great, and they're putting out amazing work, and you wish that you could do that kind of work, at your very best, and they did it in their sleep, and it's pretty universal. So don't feel bad if you start to feel a little, you start to lack some confidence in your work. Okay, so got the shadows, and then I'm gonna start bringing out some of the highlights and things. So I'm gonna start on this eye first. So with the eyes, something that you should probably remember is, like, if you peel back your eyeball, you'll see, it looks pretty red around the edges. It's not just like, it's also not like a pure white either. It's got green, yellows, and some blues and stuff. Um, it's always good to not just use the pure version of whatever color you think the object is. So, like, yeah, if you look at photos of eyes, they are likely a lot more yellow than you think, especially if you're just doing, like, if you bring a picture into Photoshop and just do a eyedropper tool on it, you're not gonna find a white other than, like, the absolute brightest reflection on it. So with this, I'm just using kind of like a ochre yellow for the reflective parts of it. I'll go a little lighter just for this one part and get the edges a little bit more pink. And I'll add some veins to those later as well. So I'm probably not going to show the full process of this, but I will likely be posting the final image on social media, and then I'll be posting this stream on my YouTube, but I'll probably do the full layered file again on for my patrons, so they can kind of see everything that I did in this process. How messy I keep things, but also, it sometimes really helps just to see, like, oh, here's all the layers and exactly how he did it, and sometimes helps you get into the mind of the artist a little bit, and things seem a little bit more feasible. So his eyeball's looking a little. I'm just gonna start coloring into it. I need it to look a little bit more round. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to make this his pupil or iris. I can't remember which is which. I'm gonna add a little bit of these emerald greens to it and see what that looks like. Just little bits. It's a little hard to tell, especially with all the sketchy lines I've got on the sketch layer, kind of covering up some of the detail. But if I treat it like an actual eye, which it's not just one color, it's just full of colors and usually has little highlights that you see are usually what's the most noticeable part, and whatever the dominant highlight color is whatever color their eyes turn out to be. So I'm going to dial that back a little bit. It's too emerald for what I wanted. I can always accentuate that later. I don't like going too hard at this point with colors that bright, but I think that helped out a little bit. Now it looks like he's got an eyeball. So now, I said before I was going to get into the highlights, but now I'm actually going to get into the highlights. What I meant to say was I'm going to fiddle with the eye for a little bit and then forget what I was doing. So I figure with this kind of background, you're going to have a very warm light source. And we'll see how that reacts to things, and if that's a little too much or not enough. I mean, sometimes it's good to just kind of play around with these types of different effect layers. Like this is vivid light. You've got like screen, which I might use. Overlay I usually do for like shadows and stuff, but it might actually work with some of the highlights on here. So I'm going to try it real lightly and see what it does. I'm just going to treat it as if he's got like a light on top of him just to make things easier. Not sure how I'm feeling about it. I do know what I need to do for his kind of gummy parts is get some. That's where I can start putting some more extreme highlights in there, because like most gums do, they're extremely they catch light in a way to where like you got like little beads of it coming off of the slime. Gonna try to replicate that with his little pink gummy parts. So this is where I'm getting a lot more messy with the coloring. I'm not thinking as hard about the technicalities of things. I more just want to. I'm using the light to basically um, accentuate what I want, but also make him look like a 3D object. So the light's going to hit the edge of this bottom lip. It's going to hit the top of his head. It's going to hit these inside facing parts of the horns. And then same goes, but the opposite for the underside of all those places, we'll get the shadow. Then hopefully through all that, he feels like a fully realized, potentially 3D character. Not going for super photorealistic here, but I want to sell the image, you know. I want to make him feel like like say if this was like concept arts, I would want the 3D guy to be able to take this and kind of render something out of it. Okay, so I'm going to try a little adjustment layer on top of all this just to see what it does with the colors. And then I can start adding some little glistening highlights. Yeah, see, I kind of like them with a little bit more green. Yeah, something like that is way more up my alley. I'm just usually go for warmer tones, so in the shadows I'm just sliding it more over to the yellow side, and with that I'm he feels a little bit more uniform, I think, but also I think works better for this design. So that's maybe a little too much because I want those blues to come through. And I can always take the mask of this and take away from the adjustment layer that I've got going on. So if that's a little bit too much yellow and I want the cooler colors to come out more in the shadows, I just take my black and apply it to those areas on the masked part of the adjustment layer. It's not, you know, a universal thing. I've said universal many times. But typically your shadows are probably going to be a little cooler. Usually cooler colors are usually pushed more to the background. It's why whenever you see atmospheric pieces like landscape pieces, the farther things go away, you know, usually one, they're not as vibrant. Two, they're probably not as dark, and then three, they've usually got a cooler tone to them because, you know, they're farther in the atmosphere and more of that is kind of layered over it and gives it a blue tone. Okay, so I like where that is, and I think last thing for tonight is me adding some little highlights here and there. Then I'll probably call it a night. Never like picking these brushes. Save. Don't forget to save. Okay, so I'm gonna try not to go for white. Something close. I'll add it in little places like this. Round out that eyeball a little bit. And then add a little bit to the edge of these horns. I realize I'm probably grumbling a lot. I keep forgetting that the mic is over here. So this is right on top of my sketch layer, because at this point, like the sketch layer, it is, you know, it's there for a reason, but now I'm trying to build on top of it to really nail the details. I'm gonna get some of these gums. Real nice and glistening. Let's see how much is too much. There we go. See, it's starting to show a little bit of texture now. You can do a little bit of that on the teeth as well, because teeth, you know, they've got spit on them, so they usually like glisten a little bit, but not too much. So I don't want to cover this piece in white to where it starts to look like I've gone overboard with it. But I find it's usually good to leave the lighter details until the very end. Otherwise, you can get a little carried away. Usually there's a little, like a spit line that wraps around the teeth. There we go. Yeah, and then now this is starting to look like something that could be like I said before, if I blurred my eyes and looked at this, he'd look close to done. But, you know, when you zoom in, he's obviously very, very messy. So I'll label that highlights. I'm gonna start making some spit. So this spit, I just kind of got like a little bit of the green from the horns. Um, like, yeah, I could have made it white, but I want to make sure that these highlights are accentuated and they don't just start to blend in with everything else. Because if I just started using the same color for all these kind of highlights, then everything starts to look the same, and you start to deprive the piece of more color. So this spit is actually, you know, kind of a darker yellow, and it also makes it look a little nastier. There we go. I don't know, should I try a rim light? Feels like usually the easy way to define your define your figure, which is just add a rim light to it, but it doesn't always work. Sometimes it can really flatten out your shape, but other times it's a real cool and easy way to just add a little splash of color to define the silhouette of your piece. So I'm just imagining there's like an orange light behind this guy. Some of his horns and folds are catching it. I don't know, does that look alright? I'm not sure if I'm in love with that. Maybe it needs to be a little darker. Or maybe a little bit more orange, like that of the background. Maybe. I'll play with it. But I think that's gonna be it for me for the night. So yeah, it's just a close look at all this. I think if I re-upload this stream, I'll show the finalized version of it. If not, I'll just put a link in the description. But thanks, guys. Just trying. I want to try streaming more often. So this is a bit of a learning experience. Gonna have to kind of get used to this and try to make it something I do, at least for now, once a week. So thanks for tuning in, anybody, and all the links to my social media are below, and I'll catch you guys next.